So, you ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. So, welcome to the BTS Creative Academy podcast. We're here today at Thought Bubble, a comic book festival. And this episode has been sponsored by Supernova Media. They look to support creatives in their creative endeavours. So thank you to Supernova Media for bringing me to Thought Bubble. So, Ruairí.
Yes.
I was so worried I was going to pronounce your name wrong, even though we just met and you just told me. How did I do?
Yeah, perfect.
Where does the name come from?
It's Irish.
It's an Irish name.
So it's Ruairi, and so Rua in Irish is red because it's actually the color of red hair, and Ri is king, so it translates to like the red haired king.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a powerful name.
Doesn't it? It's kind of until you realize like it's a ginger king. You know, there's no such thing. Sorry, gingers. But then it's anglicized to like Rory and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the nearest.
Oh, that's where Ruairí comes from.
As far as I know, yeah. Like I know it doesn't sort of translate back the other way, so I assume that's maybe it's been anglicized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like if I was to write a comic book and I wanted to look for some kind of Irish hero,
Yeah.
I think that's the name I would
Yeah.
give.
That's what I've kind of always dropped the red haired king and just been like, it means the red king. Bit of a caveat to it, like, but it sounds good.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
sound very good. I wish I had a name like that. I'm just Martin. Well, what does that mean? But no, great name. So what brings you to the festival?
So I'm a freelance comic artist, but I've been working mainly for Marvel Comics for the past 2 or 3 years, and mostly here for just doing commissions and things. You know, meeting people, and I've got like prints and things to sell, and then a little bit of networking. You know, we have other artists from artists and writers, you know, from other comics, so it's a good place to meet, you know, people that you like, peers, because we don't get a lot of that. It's a very solitary lifestyle. Like
Oh, I can imagine, being an artist. So do you get involved with just the artistry, or are you looking at the stories as well?
stories too. It kind of depends. Like at Marvel, everything's very much they have a system down. You know, like a production line kind of thing. That's where it came from. Back when Stan Lee was doing Marvel Comics, where there was the writer, and then there was a penciler, so we'd do everything in pencil, and then they would hand those pages off to an inker, so that everything could hit the print deadline. Like the print is still king in comics, so in order to like fracture everything to make sure you're not overwhelmed, that you can meet your deadlines, everything's compartmentalized. A little different now with digital. You know, you can work a little faster. So there are some writers who draw. There's some people who do everything. But with Marvel, they're still very much print is king, so everything's compartmentalized. So in that, I'm purely an artist, but I've also worked on creator own stuff, and this past year I've written some things. We have a book at Comixology called Astonishing Times, and so we done the second volume of that this year, and so I was able to like work with the writers on the book and like work my way in there and do a little bit of writing, and so I wrote a full issue, the final issue of that series. So I wrote and penciled that, and we got an inker in again to meet deadlines, so I was able to take 2 parts of the job and then hand a third part off.
So I'm wondering right now, what is it like to work for one of the biggest comic book companies in the world? What is it like to actually work for Marvel? Because I'm assuming as a comic book artist and creator, you must like Marvel.
Yeah.
It must be something in your childhood that you picked up a Marvel comic book and someday hope to aspire to draw your own versions of these superheroes, which you're now doing. So what does that feel like to you?
It's strange. Yeah, like as a kid, I still remember like discovering like Spider-Man and the X-Men and sitting at home and just like, my mum would buy me some of the comics and I would copy them from them. I would make my own comics, and like for the longest time that's what I'd wanted to do. Never really knew how to get into it, and then obviously that was being a kid in the 90s, and then by the time I was coming of age, the internet and stuff, like the doors were wide open. But there's a lot of grind to it. Like, so I started in 2012, but I was doing like independent comics in Ireland, and then through there, you're posting your work online, and you're hoping it's being seen, and you're kind of like, like the idea of the circles of influence, Stephen Covey kind of thing, where there might be somebody of some influence, like another artist, who sees it and is like, that guy has potential, and they'll like signal boost you, and then you kind of like slightly broadened your circle of influence.
Yeah, so you start with your initial circle, your
Yeah,
initial friends,
yeah,
family, and then you're going out to the next ones and the
yeah.
next ones.
Way out on the fringes, and the
Hmm.
more you expand that out and catch the eye, the more you sort of
Hmm.
move in. But it does for me at least. Like I was way on the fringes doing like independent stuff in Ireland, and then I caught the eye of a few artists. There are a few artists in Ireland who work for Marvel, and they would signal boost you, but you would maybe get as far as working for some slightly larger publishers, but not like a Marvel Comics. That was always like, you know,
The end goal,
yeah,
like one day.
the castle in the distance, and
Yes,
every
yeah.
small job would get you a little closer, but you didn't know how close. And like from as far back as 2017, I've done projects at Marvel, and then ended up back there, and so I'm in a situation where for many years I would do a little thing at Marvel, and then I would be going back to like the other stuff, and so you would get it and you'd be like, is this it? Am I working for Marvel now? And you are,
Yes.
but you're so caught up thinking about but what's next,
Hmm.
that you don't realize, well, you've done it, and then you're back to the other thing. So it's like, it's the difference between, initially you think the job is, or like the goal is to get the job at Marvel,
Hmm.
but it's really like you want to get your feet under the table. You know, again, the circle of influence, you start off on the outside of it, but to be in, and like only this past year or so, I've been able to like do jobs for Marvel and be like, oh, this is it. You know, I'm doing it. So
Yeah.
I'm starting to only feel now, after like 12 years, that I can say, yeah, I work for Marvel Comics, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's cool. Like I'm doing my dream job now. You know,
And isn't there some dream and freedom within that space where you can move in and out, where you're not stuck down to one thing, where you're creating your own projects as well,
yeah.
and maybe taking something you're learning from Marvel into your own projects?
Oh, for sure. Like as I say, this year I've started working on um, writing, and like I've learned so much just from all the scripts I read of 12 years of making comics,
Hmm.
of seeing like, you know, what I respond to, what works, what way a good script needs to be compiled. Like if I hadn't have been paying attention to that stuff as I was, you know, working through those years, I would never have had the thought. It wasn't even like I'm going to be a writer now. But you know, when you're in a situation where it's like you're making suggestions, and then it kind of just, it grew in itself inside me, and then it was more like, you know, your instincts grow for it, and then there's an opportunity, especially with creator-owned stuff, where like Frank and Aris, the my two co-creators on Astonishing Times, are just so given that I was making suggestions, and then I was sort of adding a little bit more, and then by the time we were coming up to our final script, I was like, here's a proposal for what you think, and then I kind of just built on it, and then I'd written it, and it's one of those things. It's kind of like, you know, that episode of The Simpsons where Bart goes to France,
Right.
and
Yes. Yeah.
and he
And
doesn't know anything, and then by the end he's speaking French because he
Is he-
doesn't realize he's done it.
Mhm.
There's kind of those aspects. I would never have come in. I would never have. I only wanted to pencil comics because I didn't think I was good enough at inking, and I was forced to, because the realities of the job now is that there's not enough money in a lot of, especially the smaller publishers, to hire a penciler and an inker. So I had to ink myself, and now I'm an inker as well, and then from just absorbing writing from reading scripts and stuff, I've sort of developed that kind of thing too, and then that opens up opportunities where, especially in the Marvel, when you've proven your worth to an editor, where they're like, well, I know Ruairi's a safe pair of hands for whatever project, and I'm able to like suggest, not that I would sort of step out of bounds, but it's like I'm going to work things this way, and then I have the opportunity then to say, look, here's a character that I like, and here's an idea, and because I can also now point to like this stuff that I've done, the comicsology, it's like, no, I
You can
can't.
be trusted within
Yeah,
that.
I'm a writer too, or I can at least work with another writer. But here, if you think this idea has worth, I'm a safe pair of hands for this too, you know. So it's one of those things where you start off wanting one thing, and you absorb stuff as you go along and grow in different ways. And I see that with a lot of artists I've seen, especially the past few years, are moving into writing and stuff. And it's just, I think if you're open, if you're paying attention to everything, or if you're open to like all facets of the business,
Then you can find your space
yeah.
within there. So tell me a little bit about, you touched on there about the characters that you're taking, that you've maybe found some inspiration within the characters. So you found inspiration at Marvel, but what particular characters inspired you, first of all, to become a storyteller and a comic book creator, but then to go and to put in these characters within your thing that you're doing right now?
Very much like Wolverine is my guy. So it's like the lone anti-hero kind of thing, and particularly then in Astonishing Times, like it was kind of our own sort of idea of a superhero universe, and there's you can easily parallel a lot of the heroes to to the big archetypes like Superman and things like that. And there was one guy, and he would be like your loner, like your Batman, your Wolverine kind of guy, and we focused volume 2 on him. And that's maybe where again I was more so like, this is my wheelhouse, like I can help tell this story. Maybe not the last volume, which was more like a Watchmen kind of thing.
But because you've grown up with Wolverine, because
Yeah.
you've got it's become, I guess these characters become like part of us, don't they?
Yeah, you start to relate to things in them, or you not even relate, because I I definitely like this character that we have is Colton is his name, and he's a very flawed character. And like in the first volume of the series is kind of like set in a period where superheroes have been around for decades, and they're kind of passé. Like vigilantism is kind of just like security guards,
Okay, a bit like Watchmen.
bit like Watchmen kind of thing. And there is also like a murder mystery, but it's more focused on a journalist.
Okay.
He still has the wonder for superheroes that no one else has. And he cares that there's a murderer who's targeting all these, the original superheroes. And then this Colton character shows up because he's also investigating it, and he's kind of using the journalist's leads to find out who's doing it, but not for virtuous ends. He's out to kill whoever is doing this. And so, like, I don't want to give away too much of that book, but like, whenever I was working on the book and drawing him, like, I didn't think he was a particularly he's a very flawed character. He wasn't a particularly great guy or anything. And then for volume 2, Aris, one of the writers, wanted to focus a solo series on him because he felt that was the breakout character, and we wanted to go jump back in time and do his origin story. And he's like, well, then this is where I can get in the weeds and be like, you can be a crappy person, but you're not a crappy person. There are things happen to us that put us on a path, and and I don't mean to like excuse crappy behavior, but it's like there's redemption there. So it's kind of like to go back and hardwire a redemption arc into a character we've seen at the end of it, and maybe he didn't get the redemption in the end, but there's like a baked in kind of tragedy of he didn't stand a chance.
Have you any idea why characters like this, like Logan, Wolverine, why they're so appealing to us, why they draw us in?
I can't. It's. I can't like nail it down, but like, so to kind of talk about my own journey again. Like, as I say, as a kid, I wanted to do comics and stuff in art, and I went through school doing art. But when I was GCSE and A level, to cut a long story short, like, we had a teacher who should have retired a long time before we were there. So like, moderation and stuff had changed for like GCSE. I can't remember the governing body. He was still teaching art in the 70s. Like, if you draw good, you get good marks. We weren't getting good marks because we weren't doing the coursework. The things that they wanted to see, it wasn't there, so they couldn't give us the marks. Like, he was there until the end of my AS level, and I had a C, and it was time to apply for our colleges. It's like, I'm not getting to our college with C's. Now, he retired, and then my final year, my A level year, my A2 or whatever it was, I went from all C's to all A's, and it dragged my mark up to a B. But by that stage, I'd put my UCAS forms in whenever I was off to do psychology. And so
You'd given up on?
I gave up on it,
Oh,
yeah.
no.
And I was
Wow.
doing psychology. I'd done an undergraduate in psychology, and then I was doing a postgrad in counselling because I'm fascinated about people and what makes people tick. And so when you do have like, a Wolverine or a Batman, and they're very complex characters, like, it's easy to do a pastiche of like, oh, you're just, an edgelord or whatever. But it's like, no. Especially more so, I think, a Wolverine. It's like, I think there's a relatability, and to anybody you talk to has some aspect of them where they feel like dejected in some instance or other,
Yeah.
And there's always I think you can always see a part of your character of everybody wants to do good, and Wolverine's thing is always like, I'm the best at what I do, but I hate that what I do is this, and not that I think we all walk around with self-loathing, but I think like, we all want to be better at something or other, and you can relate to a guy who like tries so hard
to do the right thing.
do the right thing, and
And sometimes fails, but he stumbles and he picks himself back up,
Yeah.
and he finds himself back within the team.
Yeah.
You know, he comes separate from the team to go
Yeah.
on his own journey, but then he comes back to it.
Yeah, and it's lovely, and they have that in that Deadpool and Wolverine movie. You know, where he has a moment where he talks about like he's wearing the suit, the yellow and blue suit, because he acted like he was above it. But like they wanted him to wear it because he was family. That was his family, but he didn't think he was worthy of it, so he scoffed at it, and then he failed them all.
Yeah.
And now like all he has left is this suit. That's his family, and that's the thing. To me, like, you know, the X-Men have always seen like you're better than the worst thing you've ever done for Wolverine. So I don't know. It might just be, you know, certain of us relate to that kind of thing. But like I like to see characters that want to do better. You know, that know somewhere deep down like I'm better than how I view myself. You know, and it's nice, especially in like a book like the X-Men or whatever, where you have a broad swathe of characters. Like Beast is the opposite. Like Beast looks like a beast, and but he loves himself. Like he's so confident, and he's, you know, he's accepted everything about himself. Great dynamics, you know, for like stories and that kind of thing. So I know I relate to Wolverine, but then there's like a Beast. There's Gambit's kind of the same, similar kind of thing to Wolverine. There's those archetypes, but yeah, I don't know if Wolverine's for everybody, but he's definitely for me.
I'm wondering now if somewhere between. I like to think that things happen to us in our lives for a reason, and sometimes we don't know at the moment what that reason is. But I'd like to think with you've become a good and an important storyteller because you had that failure at art. That you've obviously naturally got some gifts there and some talents and some wanting to do it, but you needed to fail and go off and study psychology so that you could understand the storytelling and you could understand people. Do you get a sense of that at all?
Yeah, like a lot of what I do, like a lot of things that people seem to respond to in what I do is they would call it like the acting, the facial expressions, because a lot of what people, like I know comics in general, when you think of comics, it's like big splashy pages of poses and stuff, but when you're reading the comic, like it's a well-known thing for artists and stuff. It's like people are drawn to faces and hands. You know yourself, when we talk, that's how we express ourselves.
When we communicate, I find myself doing things
That's, we don't
like
even
that,
think
and
about it.
it's just natural. And when I'm in these conversations, I watch people's faces and I see them watching mine, and we back that communication is just as important as the verbal.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you have to show that the character's invested in what they say, but I'm always like interested when I get a script. I'll read it, and you know there are the beats of like this happens, then that happens, and then I want to go back and like look at like what's the journey of the character here? Like on, you know, is there a change in their mood? Are they experiencing something that changes them from the start to the end? There's never a massive amount of change in comics because they're serialized. They might go through an adventure, but at the end there's like a reset where they're just
They go back to do the next adventure.
Yeah, like Wolverine's back to being like, you know, the self-loathing loner, despite what happens. You know, same for Batman and everything. But they have, you know, to convey the journey is a lot about understanding the people, or at least for me, like, you know, what are they going through? Why are they feeling that way? And how can I convey that in body language? Or even there's body language is a big thing, and then there's like how you frame characters. You know, like simple little things like, you know, if the hero, you know, if the hero in the scene arrives, you want to like look up at him, you know, shoot him from a low angle so that he looks more, you know, imposing and stuff. But if he suffers a defeat and you want him to make low, you like choose angles above him that you're looking down on him, because then he looks low down, and it's all like that subconscious stuff that I understand because I've gone through and like studied all that stuff. So it's like another thing in my toolbox that I can pull from to like make the stories a little bit more human. You know, I know a lot of people, we have these superheroes, you know, and you want to like be able to recognize parts of yourself in those characters. It's why Spider-Man has a mask, so he could be anybody. You know, you could imagine yourself being him. But at the same time,
and I very much did with Spider-Man. I very much, when I was younger, I was like, it was that thing of like, oh, there's a kid that everyone else sees as an adult, as a superhero that is doing these wonderful things out in the world, but then he's this guy at school, this normal guy that everyone's just treating how you get treated at school.
Yeah, and that's it. And I remember like Stan Lee said that was the thing that set Spider-Man off. Like he could have been just another superhero.
Yeah.
But it was the fact of like how that impacted on a regular life, which is a great thing when you think about it, because we all have stuff like, you know, like I'm doing my dream job, but I have a family, I have 2 kids, a mortgage, and then when I'm doing my dream job, that's taken away from this thing, you know.
Of
So
course.
it's so relatable in so many ways, but that's the thing, you know, the superheroics is fun, but like there's still somebody under that mask, especially for like a Spider-Man, where like generally, especially in the early days, whatever he was doing was getting in the way of what he wanted to do, and like that's a human thing. So to be able to convey that, especially with the character with the mask, where it does come down to like body language and framing and stuff, but you have to convey to the reader, you know, the human impact of what he's doing, because I think a big thing about why superheroes is so good, you know, it's such a popular medium, is because we can relate to the people, but we all want to feel like we can do the extraordinary,
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
but it needs a human story underneath.
So for me, it was very much. I grew up with DC through a bit of a fluke, a bit of an accident. My granddad worked for publishers that distributed DC,
Cool.
and every weekend he'd drop me off some DC comics, and so I just naturally picked up DC and Superman, Batman. Particularly Superman was a big influence for me. And you mentioned your kids there, and I was wondering with you how you're introducing comic books to them. How old are they?
3 and 6.
3 and 6. So is there? I'm thinking now. So my son's 19 and my daughter's 16, and I'm
You don't
thinking.
look old enough to have kids.
Yeah, I'm not. But they make me feel odd for sure. My kid's quite young, but when my son was about 5 or 6 when I handed over my DC comic books to him, and handed him over not just Superman and Batman, but Watchmen as well, which I know is more of an adult comic book, but they have heavily influenced me in my life moving forward. They gave me a lot of inspiration and guidance throughout my life.
Yeah,
That thing of looking to these characters and going, oh, I can be better than who I am.
especially like with the Superman. Like I worked a few years ago on Superman when it was John Kent was in the role of Superman. I worked in the arc that sort of brought Clark back, which was lovely. Being like, you know, it was only just recently become a father, and then to tell a story about a father and a son reuniting was nice. But like it was the other artist, the main artist on the book, Cian Tormey, who's another artist from Ireland, got me on that book, and he sort of broke it down for me with Superman. He's like, and he doesn't like whenever I bring this up because it's quite a corny line, but he's like, Tom Taylor wrote a scene, and it was just Superman like consoling somebody, which he does a lot, and showing that he relates to like the human condition, even though he's not a human. And he's like, yeah, I get it. Like he's Superman because he's a superman. He relates to people, like, and he does this all just out of a deep caring for people, for their well-being. And that's like, what's better? Like, what's a better lesson?
A better way to move forward. I used to say to my son, I don't know if it was a line within in a comic or somewhere. Must have picked it up somewhere along the line. But I used to say to him, whenever he was having a struggle or a problem, I'd say, what would Superman do?
Yeah.
And that's a good, easy place to go back to. Yes, because he doesn't. It's not always about his powers. Often, a lot of the time, the things that he's fixing and the issues that he's dealing with are human issues.
Yeah.
So take that and apply that. You take those stories and apply that to your life, and it's not a bad philosophy to move forward with,
definitely not. Like, and that's like with the kids. I remember like whenever my daughter was, she's the eldest, she's the 5-year-old, and sort of I would tell her like, oh, I drew this, and it meant nothing. Like it just didn't register, and so it was kind of like, I also don't want to be the guy who's like, you guys have to be, you know.
Yes, forcing them down a certain path.
But I was also like recognizing, even when she was like 1 or 2, and I was watching her color in, and I was like, I can see her, like it was wild coloring in, but I was like, I can see her starting to like concentrate her coloring around things. Like I think she's going this way, and she's a fantastic little artist. But I've never been like, you know, pushing the comics or superheroes. Like she loves Disney princesses and all that stuff. And my son, he's 3, and I've never been like, you know, superheroes and stuff. Some people have bought things because his daddy is a comic artist. Here's, you know, some superhero stuff. But he discovered Spidey and His Amazing Friends, like the kids show, the animated show, all by himself. And then like my wife was telling him, you know, Daddy draws Spider-Man, you know, and would show him stuff, and that's sort of opened his mind. And then they've just recently brought out like a little comic book of Spidey and his amazing friends, and it's so cute because the first page is showing a kid. It's very much tailored towards a very young age
Yes.
of how to read a comic and what speech bubbles are.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and
Nice.
so there's a comic shop in Belfast, Northern Ireland, would be my local, even though it's like 30 minutes away. Where I went for a signing whenever I had an X-Men cover come out just a few months ago, and they were showing me this thing, and they gave me a few copies of it, and I brought them home to have only, like, I had this lovely inline with them. It's something that they both love, the Spidey thing. Here it is, and I was able to tell them, this is a comic, this is what I do.
Yes, yeah.
And so sometimes at bedtimes they want me to read, the Spidey comic to them. And then, like my daughter now she's coming home from school and she's like, oh, I'm doing a comic. And she's showing me that she's drawing,
I think that's the best way if you want to give your kids some direction in life, is not to necessarily push them in that direction, but just to show them and just to place things in front of them sometimes. I've learned that with my daughter, there's a lot of books I would like her to read, but if ever I go to her, read this book, there's no chance she's going to read it. But if I just leave it on the side, on the coffee table, there's a chance she's going to pick it up and flick through. And I think that's with these, you found a career that you love, a lifestyle that you love, and maybe they could follow in some way, but they'll watch, they'll learn, they'll listen. You don't have to push them into it. And then if they may decide to go somewhere else with it.
That's it.
It may influence them in a different way that you don't know or expect.
Yeah, that's it. Like there's lessons to learn, especially, at least, I've done the university thing, and then I've ended up in a career where you don't need any qualifications to go into it. I've been self-employed, so I know what it takes to start out on your own doing stuff.
No, and I guess no one in the comic book world has said, what's your degree in psychology?
Yeah.
That's never come up, but it's in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, it influences what
you
you do.
You don't realise how helpful it is for storytelling, and it's something that if someone comes to me with a portfolio downstairs, and I can be like, look, facial expressions, whatever, and that's another thing where you can, if you're open to like learning, you can absorb so much because everybody brings something different to their work. But yeah, in terms of like with the kids, whenever they decide to do, I have experiences that I can help them with, but I don't need them to walk the road I walked to learn any of it, so it doesn't matter what they decide to do. It's like if they want to go to university, fine, have a plan for after. They want to go out on their own, it's like, okay, here's a little bit of advice, or like learn from my mistakes kind of thing.
That would be nice.
Yeah, even like
as my son's 19 and my daughter's 16. At this moment, I'm often saying, learn from the things that I did at your age.
Yeah,
they don't want to know.
Exactly. Yeah,
They don't want to know. Like, I think we have to discover some of these mistakes for ourselves. I don't think that we can, be told stories necessarily on everything.
Yeah, no.
Some of it we have to follow through.
I have my younger brother's like 12 years younger than me, so when it was coming time for him to choose like GCSEs, I had already done university. I don't think I was starting comics yet, but we were able to ask him, like, at least whenever we were going through it, like I was maybe one of the first generations of our family that went to university, and it was treated much like school. Like, you go to school, you get the qualifications to go to university, you come out of university, you get a job. But it's not like that, because you have to know what you're going to do with your degree, what's next. And there was no one there to tell me these things.
Next step.
Yeah, so I came out of university being like, where's the jobs? And then I worked in retail because I didn't know how to, transition that. But to be able to ask him, not to tell him what to do, but to be like, what would you like to work in? And he loved computers. I was like, right, let's go to like the UCAS forums and see what you need to get into whatever a computer course is at the minute. This is obviously a few years out and it changes all the time. Okay, you need like physics. So you're going to have to have an A level in physics. To get it into like an A level in physics, you're going to have to do maybe like, what is it, double award science or something, to get the prerequisite to get onto your A level. Like, if you want the path to there, you got to start here. So, at least to say, to give you like a path to know the decisions to make, and then it's like, if you want to make the decisions, fine, like do whatever you want, but that's what I mean, rather than like, okay, I've heard of some parents who are like, right, you're going to be a dentist, and so you
must follow this and must follow that. I've often seen with those people that have had, not always, but often where their parents are forcing them down a certain path, there's something inside of them that they're not fulfilling that they're not. There's something they're lacking.
Yeah.
And I think we've all got our own individual purposes and journeys to go on.
Yeah,
that,
you just don't know.
That if we force that on our children, it can actually be quite detrimental to them.
Yeah.
So giving them some guidance.
Yeah, it's like you will walk the path I walked, or it's like, where do you want to go? You want, because I don't know anything about computers, but I'm like, I know at least I've walked a path that I've walked halfway down it and realized I've walked the wrong path. But I can tell you, if you want to go to that career, like, that's the path. At least, like, it's not a well beaten path, but that's the direction to go, and that's it.
So here's a big hypothetical. This is a tough one, right? So this is going online. This is out there. Your kids are now 19, 20. They don't know what to do with their life. What would you say to them directly from now?
It's never too late. Like, I had to like transition at like 16, 17, which is a young age to figure. Like, this is the thing. We sort of, like, our kids go to school and they have to make these huge life decisions in their early mid-teens, where, like, their brains are being pumped full of, like, chemicals that they've never experienced before. Like, how do you focus and make these life decisions?
And a lot of people are forcing you, aren't they? The schools, the system wants you to know exactly what you should be doing.
And they're incentivized, like, at least whenever I was in school, they're incentivized to get you to go to university, because their big selling point was 90% of our pupils go to university. And what if that's not for me? And that happened to me. Like, I didn't really know what I needed to get comics, so then I had to pivot, and I was on the path to being a counsellor. And the funny thing was, like, whenever I talk to people about wanting to be, this is when I was, like, choosing courses, and I wanted to be a comic artist. Like, but, like, there's not a lot of money in comics. It's very hard to get into. You work for a long time for little money, and then eventually you might get a job. And then I was doing my postgrad in counselling. I was doing work experience in a psychology unit at a hospital, and I was talking to the counsellor one day, and we were sitting in this, like, drab, council office, and he was like, and I worked hard, like, I done all this voluntary work, I was doing, like, night shifts at on helplines and stuff, and started to get a little bit of work, and I was getting grants, and that would sort of sustain me for a year, and now I'm here. And I looked around and was like, I don't want any of this, but everything you said is what they told me about comics, and I want that. And so I pivoted, and, like, so I didn't start into comics until I was maybe 27.
That pivot, how did you do that, though? Because that's so hard for a lot of people, You almost, it sounds to me like you almost could have had a very steady career, which is quite appealing to a lot of people. You could have had a very steady income.
Sometimes I wish I did.
Yeah. So how did you do that then? How did you take that leap?
At the same time, so after I'd finished the degree, I was working in the civil service, and then I took on, like, a part-time HND in graphic design, because I was thinking, well, maybe I'll be a graphic designer. And one of the course directors there, when I was handing in work, and he was talking to me, and I was saying to him, like, I can't do the computer stuff. Like, people were turning out, I was doing, like, a lot of hand-drawn stuff, and people were turning out these great, like, textures and stuff on computers. Like, I can't figure that out. And he said to me, you don't need to. Like, you're the art director. Like, you don't understand. What you're showing me is you're the guy who designs this stuff, and you tell them what to do. Like, anybody can figure that out, but you're going to be an art director, that kind of thing. And that was sort of like give me a bit of confidence to be like, okay, maybe this is it. And I was actually talking to my uncle, who was a psychologist, and I was telling him, like, this was around the time, I was like, I don't think I'm going to continue the psychology. And he's like, listen, going to the civil service and climate, you've got a degree, like, it's, that'll be fine too. And so I was in this position of, I had a few sort of, I could stay in the civil service, and they wanted to keep me at a temporary contract, they wanted to keep me there. I was coming up to the end of my HND, I could step that up to a degree, do a part-time degree, or I could, like, at the same time, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was moving to England to do teaching, and I was talking to my course director about what to do, and he was saying, the degree would be good, but you'll be all right without it. You don't have to do it. And then I was saying about, I think I might try comics, and he's like, yeah, go for it. Like no one ever.
Sometimes you just need that. Someone just say, do it.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
That was it, and
Yeah.
like the thing we're talking about, like with raising kids and stuff, and like showing them the path without forcing them down a path. Like my mother always taught me, there are consequences for the decisions you make, and I'll never tell you what to do, but I will tell you have to deal with the consequences of your decisions. And that was it. And it was like one of those things. And I said to my mum, I'm going to move to England and I'm going to try to be a comic artist. And she's like, okay. And I talked to my girlfriend at the time. She's like, she didn't try to talk you out of it. She didn't ask you, a million questions. Like, no, like she trusts me to kind of like give it a go. And like, she's one of the ones that have always been like a champion of like, she loves, anytime a comic comes out, she's like, can I have a copy of the comic? So, when you have like those people in your corner, I think it wasn't easy. It didn't walk out. It was an overnight success. It was a hard grind, and like, God forgive me, my girlfriend had a lot of hard times of like I didn't have any work and stuff. And if I did do it again, I would do it differently. I wouldn't jump like I did. I encourage a lot of people now to like.
But would you be here though at this moment if you didn't? If you didn't take, I think if you want some big rewards and you want to, in some ways you said it yourself, you kind of live in the dream, aren't you right now?
Yeah.
And if you want to live the dream, you do have to take a risk. I don't think I've met anyone yet that has managed to move forward with their life with the things that they want to do without the risk.
Without taking the risk, yeah. I think it was very like naive at the time in that I didn't know what the consequences of the choice were in terms of the money. Like, so what I do tell people now is like there is a point where you're going to have to leap, but like if you understand what this job is before you start, and you understand like what some of the consequences are, like that's what I'm telling people. It's like if you have a job now, you keep that job until you have no choice but to leave it for the comics. But before you go, you make sure you have maybe 3 to 6 months of whatever you build your outgoings in the bank, because there are going to be stretches of no work or very little work, and you're going to have to like subsidize yourself, because like there was a joke whenever I was coming out. It's like, oh, if you want to be a successful comic artist, you need a successful partner to bring in the money. And it's like, I can tell you now from experience, that's not going to happen. No, and it's not a good foundation for a relationship. So you want to be like self-reliant and stuff. You want to be prepared for those things. But again, I couldn't tell you that if I hadn't walked that road.
If you'd be doing it now.
Yeah.
Is it worth even thinking about? Because you're here now, you're creating your own stuff, you're working for Marvel, you're doing that dream. So is there anything about that dream that, because you're kind of in that place, is there anything that still drives you forward? What's next? What does the future dream look like from here?
So like, the great thing about a Marvel is there's always, even not in a Marvel, but in this career, there's always like a next step, especially like what I do, and like a lot of the guys that I would have a lot in common with, is we want to get better. So you're good enough to like get the work at Marvel, but then there are the guys that are like, they sell the big numbers of books. They're the guys that everybody looks to.
There's people you aspire to still be.
Yeah. So there's always that. And then outside of that, because of the writing, it's like, if I've done everything I need to do at Marvel, can I start doing my own stories? And what will that be? So everything can change. You don't know where the career's going. You don't know what your next job offer is going to be. Like, I'm working on a series at the minute, and that'll be 5 issues. And then who knows, like the next thing they might be like, you know what, Ruairí's ready to work on a Spider-Man. You just don't know what that is. So there's always something to look towards. So the editors and the people at Marvel always want to know, like, what do you want to work on? What do you want to do? Because they'll look, if they know what you want, they'll kind of, as long as you can prove to be a safe pair of hands, they'll happily sort of like direct you that way. So if it's characters, if it's you want to expand your role into like a little bit of writing or something.
And what do you say to that question right now? We're at Marvel, right? Let's say we're at Marvel right now. What do you want to work on?
I want to work on like an obscure 90s character. So I'd love to work on Spider-Man, but there's like...
Who's an obscure character then? Because like, Spider-Man's more mainstream, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so I would love to work on Blade. I'd love to do a Blade book, but...
There seems to be a resurgence of a wanting for Blade, I feel like, in the air right now.
Definitely, especially after Mahershala Ali won the Oscar and then said, I want to be Blade, which was a great thing because it brought him back. He hadn't been in the comics or anything, but... I don't know if you were reading Marvel in the 90s. You remember the Clone Saga?
The
The Clone Saga in Spider-Man, where
No.
they changed Spider-Man, like Peter Parker.
where he went into like Doc Ock. No, that was to do with. No, that was something else.
Oh, that
wasn't
was
it?
the Superior Spider-Man. That was
Yes,
maybe
yes.
in the 2010s. No, this was like in the mid 90s where they had the Scarlet Spider,
Okay.
and he was a clone.
Mm-hmm.
There was a story in like the 70s or something where one of the villains cloned Spider-Man and made the two clones fight, and
Right.
then Spider-Man beat the clone, and that was the end of the story. But
Mhm.
then in the 90s, they were kind of in this position where they thought, we've kind of got Peter Parker now. He's going to get married, or maybe he was married.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting very grown up, and his adventures are getting very like dark.
How
and
do we
adult-y.
reverse this? a bit?
Yeah, and it's like, so what if we brought the clone back and just switched them out, and then because then he would be single, he would be like unemployed and stuff,
Nice.
and we could
Yeah.
have him just being the freelance photographer again. It didn't go well. People were more married to like the idea of Peter Parker as Spider-Man than anything. But this character, he got into enough. Like, that's where I discovered. I just started reading Spider-Man around that time, and it was exciting for me because the cartoon was on TV, and it was all very much like,
Yes.
Saturday morning adventures. And then I got the comic, and it was the first line was like, Ben Reilly is the clone of Peter Parker, and you're like maybe 10 or 11, and it's like, oh, this is
What's going on here?
what is this new
Yeah.
stuff that I've never heard of. And he had a trashy suit. It was like just a red spandex and a hoodie.
I feel like I must have missed this. I need to seek this out.
It's very controversial in that not a lot of people liked it, and it was successful. People were interested in the first few issues, and then Marvel done what publishers tend to do of like they just expanded it out too much. They made the story, they just sort of tried to drag it out, and so there was a lot of bad comics made in between, and people were like, we just want Peter Parker back, we're
Right.
tired of this. But they eventually put this guy into like the spider suit and stuff, and he's another one of those characters where people clamored to bring him back, and they've had him back, and they're trying to change him because fans want him, but like the majority of readers don't want another Spider-Man, so they're trying to change him. And especially like he's just another Peter Parker. We don't need two Peter Parkers. It's fine to have a Miles Morales who has his own
Separate
backstory
storyline.
and he has spider powers, whereas this guy is just Peter Parker, but he dyes his hair blonde and he goes by a different name. But I have this idea for a story to like remove him from that, but still keep me. He's always been in the shadow, and like I don't know if it's because I'm like a middle child and a younger brother that it's like he's like a little brother and he wants to stand out and be his own guy. I want to write his story. Like I want him to be his own guy.
So being in a good, strong position that you're kind of in with Marvel, how would you progress that then? How would you make that move forward? Just through having conversations with people there and just letting people know
It's kind of like
what you want?
Yeah, there's part of wanting like knowing what I want, or like can't make any demands, but I can sort of recognize like, right, okay, you have this, because at the end of the day these are publishers and these are characters to us, these are heroes to us, but they're properties at the end of the day. They're intellectual properties, and so you have a property in this character that there's a demand for, but it's complicated. So how can you like work this property in a way that the people that want them get what they want, but it doesn't alienate everybody else? And I think I have an idea for how to do that. And if I can present that to them and be like, if the demand comes up again for this character and you feel like it's percolating that you might do another series, here's an idea that might make them, give the people that want him what they want without diluting Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And it might make him a viable property again.
It sounds interesting to me. I'm looking forward to reading it already.
I've touched wood. I have to work up not work up the courage. You have to find the time now to like put a little pitch together.
Yeah.
But like this is the first time where I felt like I would never ask for anything before. When I used to have those little stints in Marvel and then not get any more work, I wouldn't ask for anything. I would just hope for more. Whereas now, I feel like I think I'm in a position where I could,
Where you can do that, where you can make that next leap. You've done it before, when you pivoted with your job and you changed your career, you changed your life. You can do it again.
I hope so.
I think there's something in it there.
Yeah, I feel like it. This is the first time in a long time where I feel like this could be, stepping on to the next
level.
Yeah, the next stage of the journey.
I look forward to following it. So if anyone has been watching or listening to this conversation, where do they find out more about you?
So you can find me on social media, so like X and Instagram. It's at Ruairí Coleman, which is a terrible decision in hindsight to like make my name my handle, which I've changed for like Blue Sky.
Why do you feel that?
Because my family members
The personal, is it the...
No, it's that my family members can't even spell my
Oh,
name.
cool.
So to ask people like, oh, look for Ruairí Coleman
Yeah.
on the socials, it's got to be, it was a silly decision.
Oh, but like I said, I think that goes back to how we started this conversation. It's a very unique name.
True.
Like I say, it sounds like a superhero name.
Yeah,
So it stands out. It's memorable.
Should have been like Red King Comics.
Red King Comics. Well, there you go. That might be the next handle.
Copyright that. Yes. But yeah, so on Blue Sky, it's Coleman Comic Art.
Nice.
And I'll sort of use that going forward. I don't know what social media is going to go. And then the book that I'm working on at the minute is Infinity Watch at Marvel. So I've just finished issue 2 before I came here. I'm going back to start issue 3 tomorrow. But that comes out, the first issue comes out next month. So if you look for that in the shops.
Excellent. I'll be sure to add links to the comment section below this video or below the audio. But I really do appreciate you, Ruairí, for joining me for this conversation. And if anyone was watching or listening, we appreciate you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So thank you very much.
Cheers,
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you. Cheers, mate.